Welcome to my latest fixation. I'm Joshua, and I'm constantly challenging myself to look at this beautifully warped world through a slightly different lens. From the lonely cryptids lurking into the static to the social mysteries of the digital age, like why our online friends never quite look the way we expect them to. This is my way of deconstructing horror, gaming, obscure history, and the wonderfully strange puzzle of human connection. So pull up a chair, put your headphones in, and let's learn something. So usually on this show, we take a magnifying glass at the obscure corners of the world. Regional folklore, social architecture, or weird historical anomalies. But today, the niche system we're deconstructing is the human machine. And specifically, my own. And a high-stakes plumbing crisis that just proved how terrifyingly brilliant and incredibly stubborn our biology can be. So, where do we start? Let's start on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. I wake up, the sun is out, everything is normal. I step out of bed, I stand up, and, well, gravity immediately wins. My entire right side grows completely dark. No signal, no communication from the brain. I am free falling towards the floor. Now, if you want a case study in human psychology, look what the brain does in a split-second crisis. Mine didn't panic. It didn't flash my life before my eyes. Instead, it leaned into pure, unadulterated comedy. On my way down to the rug, my left hand instinctively grabbed a pillow from the bed and threw it under me to cushion my own fall. I'm lying there on the carpet, half my body completely offline, and my partner rushes over, understandably freaking out. And this is where the timeline sort of splits into two different terrifying realities. In my own head, I am perfectly calm. I am actively trying to brush it off. I think I'm just looking at my partner in the eye, cracking jokes on the rug, saying, hey, it's fine. I just need a second to catch my breath. Just give me a minute. I thought I was keeping it casual. I thought I was speaking. But in fact, I wasn't. In reality, I couldn't say a single word. My brain was firing commands, but the transmission lines were completely severed. It felt like I was physically tripping over my words before the sounds could even form in my throat, before they could even escape my lips. I was trapped behind a glass wall, fully conscious, entirely convinced I was communicating, while my partner was looking down at a version of me that was completely silent, unable to make a sound. Total, absolute denial on the inside, absolute medical emergency on the outside. So, let's freeze frame right there. I'm hovering mid-air, half paralyzed, throwing a pillow down to soften my own landing, and then mentally generating jokes while trapped inside my own skull. Why? Why is that the default of the human mind in a catastrophe? Why does the brain try to hallucinate normalcy when the physical system is collapsing? In social psychology and cognitive science, there is a fascinating phenomenon known as behavioral normalcy bias, paired with a heavy dose of crisis denial. When an expected disaster strikes, whether it's a flash flood, a structural failure, or half your body going completely offline on a random Tuesday morning, the human brain doesn't instantly pivot into movie-style panic. Instead, it does everything in its power to pretend things are still normal. Think about it. When a fire alarm goes off in a crowded building, what do people usually do first? They don't immediately book it and run for the exits. They kind of look around at each other and they whisper, is this a drill or is someone cooking toast? They continue to pack up their laptops, look for clues to validate that our safe, predictable reality isn't actually collapsing. My brain looked at a severe neurological event and said, well, we can't stand up, but if we just generate the thought of a witty remark to our partner, then this is just a clumsy morning mishap. This isn't an emergency at all. It's a survival mechanism designed to prevent paralyzing terror, but it's also incredibly dangerous. We try to negotiate with physics. We treat a structural emergency like a temporary inconvenience because processing the alternative requires a level of panic our conscious mind just isn't ready for. So, if you ever find yourself in a crisis trying to clean up a mess or make a joke while the world is burning around you, don't feel bad. You're just running a deeply hardwired piece of human software. But take it from me, if your body mutinies, stop negotiating. Put the pillow down and let them call 911. Ultimately, human stubbornness lost to reality. The paramedics arrived, and because my right side is a total no-fly zone, they have to physically hoist me down my own stairs. So I go ahead and I roll into the ER in a complete blur, fading in and out of consciousness. A high-alert stroke team swarms the bed. They hook me up to monitors, and my blood pressure is hitting rock bottom. It's sitting at a dangerously low 80. When your blood pressure drops that low, the blood flow in your arteries doesn't flow like a river anymore. It turns into a sludge. And in that sluggish, low-pressure environment, a massive blood clot formed and locked itself tightly inside a major highway supplying oxygen to the left side of my brain. But right as they're wheeling me into the scanner of a head CT, my brain plays one final, cruel trick on me. Suddenly, the fog entirely clears. I snap out of it. I completely feel fine. My right side comes back online. I can move, I can talk, I can think. I honestly looked at the doctors and thought, wow, awesome, false alarm. Let's get out of the scanner, I'm gonna go home. It was of course a mirage, but it was my body's natural enzymes that briefly managed to crack the pipe open and just let enough rush of oxygen through. The symptoms vanished, but the clot was still there, sitting like a ticking time bomb. And I hadn't actually had a stroke yet, but the doctors saw the scans, they saw the clot, and they knew a massive storm of brain swelling was heading my way if that blockage didn't stay put. So, they vashed me straight to the Neuro intensive care unit. But they didn't rush me into an operating room right away or anything. Instead, we actually entered a highly calculated, multi-day holding pattern. To keep my brain tissue alive, they took away my heart medicine. They told me that they were deliberately inducing a state called a permissive hypertension. In play terms, they wanted my blood pressure to skyrocket into the stratosphere. They weaponized my own high blood pressure, using it like a physical hammer to shove blood past the clot through tiny microscopical background vessels, desperate to keep the brain alive and stable. And so, I waited, not for a day, not for 2 days. I sat in that ICU bed redlining for 6 straight days. From that Tuesday all the way through the weekend. Now, if you want to talk about the raw reality of a long-term ICU stay, let's talk about the logistics of being a one-armed pincushion. Because of my specific cardiovascular history, my left arm is a strict hospital-mandated no-fly zone for needles. No IVs, no blood pressure cuffs allowed on the left side, which means poor righty had to take 100% of the damage. For 144 hours straight, every single continuous IV fluid line, every single dose of contrast dye, every single hourly blood drawn went into one single arm. I spent a 6-day countdown looking entirely lopsided. One of my body was totally clear, while the other side was black, blue, absolutely bladdered, watching the monitors beep while my blood pressure redlined, waiting for the scheduled move. Well, for the most part. I mean, I did have my belly was bruised because of heparin. But either way, Let me paint a picture for you of what it actually means to be a modern patient under a strict one-arm, no-fly zone constraint in a neuro ICU. In a medical environment, everything runs on standardized protocols. Nurses have a routine, but when you place a giant figurative "do not touch" sign over an entire half of a patient's body, you break the automation. Every single medical professional who walks through that door has to completely re-engineer how they do their job. My right arm became a piece of high-traffic infrastructure. Imagine trying to sleep when you have a continuous IV fluid line running into your forearm, a blood pressure cuff cycling and squeezing every 60 minutes like a mechanical python, and a phlebotomist waking you up at 4 o'clock in the morning to find a fresh, unbruised vein for a contrast dye draw on an arm that already looks like it lost a fight with a lawnmower. And then there are the logistics of everyday survival. Try opening a plastic Jell-O cup using only your left hand while your right hand is taped to an IV board. Try texting your friends back to let them know that you're alive when your hand is hooked up to a machine that starts alarm beeping every second you bend your elbow. You become an absolute master of one-handed physics. You learn how to use your chin to anchor blankets, how to swing your legs to create momentum, and how to navigate a completely lopsided experience. It gives you a profound appreciation for the sheer engineering of accessibility. We take bilateral movement entirely for granted until a medical mandate locks down 50% of your options. For 6 days, my world was entirely dedicated by what my left hand could reach and what my right arm could endure. It turns a hospital room into a very weird, high-stakes puzzle game. Now, the goal the entire time was to stabilize my brain until the following Tuesday. That was the day of a pre-planned surgery. The ICU holding pattern had done its job, protecting the tissue from turning into an actual stroke. On that Tuesday, the surgical team went in on schedule. They performed a craniotomy, physically opening the skull, clearing the crisis zone, and plugging my skull back together, stitching the bone securely back into place so it could begin the long process of fusing back together. The operation was a total medical success. My brain tissue survived completely untouched, but as it turns out, surviving a massive neurological crisis and literal brain surgery doesn't mean you can survive the ultimate boss of the modern world: hospital administration. Alright, so by Saturday, 4 days post-op, I am completely ready to go. In fact, I have been told for 2 full days that I was supposed to be discharged. My surgeon had officially signed off on it. As far as he was concerned, I was in the clear. The nurses were entirely on my side, completely ready for me to get out of there and finish recovering from the comfort of my home. The gentleman that helped with my administration of medicine was all on board with it as well. So, bright and early at 8:30 a.m. on Saturday morning, my nurse officially followed up and put in the request for my discharge paperwork. And she said, you can go ahead and take out your IVs, you should be good to go, and go ahead and get changed, and we should have you over here soon. So I tell my partner what's going on. My partner shows up, and so we're waiting. And then nothing happens. An hour goes by. 2 hours go by. 3 hours go by. My nurse has been aggressively firing off multiple follow-up requests throughout the day, trying to shake the system loose. But we are trapped in a complete digital black hole. Meanwhile, my arm, my poor right arm, the designated needle runway, has officially hit its breaking up point. On top of the swelling from a week of continuous IV abuse, I actually developed 2 distinct blood clots right at the IV injection sites the day before. My arm was literally clotting around the plastic tubes. I was beyond done. Luckily, I had those removed, but I was still in a lot of pain from that. And I wanted to be out of the hospital and in my own bed. So, ultimately, we're falling back with my nurse. She's contacting the front desk. They're trying to figure out anything and everything. I've had several nurses that have helped me throughout the weeks come in and check on me and see how I'm doing. It was really nice of them. Ultimately, we finally uncovered the glitch in the matrix. The hospitalist on duty the night before that was supposed to hand off my chart to the incoming doctor before they left, she did. She walked out because my chart was lost in the limbo of an incomplete shift handoff. The new hospitalist hadn't even sat down to look at it yet. A forgotten checkbox on a digital chart by a doctor who had already clocked out was literally the only thing holding me hostage in a hospital bed. So sitting there with 2 clots on my arm and a skull freshly stitched back together, I looked at the bureaucratic stalemate and decided I had reached my absolute limit. I did the only logical thing a stubborn podcaster could do. I signed my name on the dotted line, declared myself against medical advice, packed my bags, and walked out the front door on my own terms. Now, as I sit here recording this right now, I have officially crossed the finish line of the post-surgery peak swelling window my surgeon warned me about. The physical inflammation is settling down, and the reality of real life is rushing back. But as a host who is entirely addicted to tracing things back to the root cause, I couldn't just stop at the hospital exit doors. I had to ask the ultimate question. How does a massive blood clot just randomly spawn inside the brain of a guy living a perfectly normal life on a Tuesday morning? Well, to answer that, we're gonna have to pull back the lens a little bit and rewind the clocks about 11 years. Back in 2015, I survived a meteor. Wow, dude. Back in 2015, I survived a major cardiovascular disaster, an aortic dissection. When the main pipeline leaving my heart tore back then, a surgeon stepped in to install an emergency aortic graft. It saved my life, absolutely, but that procedure left behind massive structural scarring right where the major arterial branches exit to feed the rest of the body. In fact, that original graft surgically accidentally left me with a permanent rare vascular abnormality known as a subclavian seal syndrome. In fact, that original graft surgery accidentally left me with a permanent rare vascular anomaly. In fact, that original graft surgery accidentally left me with a permanent rare vascular abnormality known as a subclavian seal syndrome. To keep my left arm alive after 2015, my body had to compensate for that human-engineered design flaw. It pulled off a brilliant, decades-long structural heist. It literally forced blood to flow backward down my neck. Systems are so incredibly resilient, they will find a workaround to keep the lights on during a crisis, even when working around a structural anomaly left by human hands. Now, I want to pause on the phrase subclavian seal syndrome, because from a purely mechanical engineering perspective, it is one of the coolest and also most terrifying things a human body can do. Think about how a city's water grid system works. You have a giant high-pressure main pipe leaving the water plant, branching into smaller streets to feed individual houses. If a main pipe gets blocked or damaged, the houses on that street loses pressures. When my original graft surgeon left behind that structural scarring back in 2015, the main pipe feeding my left arm was essentially choked off. Under normal physics, that arm should have been withered. The arm should have died from a lack of oxygen, but the human body refuses to accept a dead end. Your circulatory system has these tiny, obscure backup connections called collateral vessels. When the pressure drops in my left arm, my body looked up at the main highway heading straight up to my brain, the vertebral artery, and it pulled off a literal highway robbery. It lowered the pressure in my arm so low that it forced the blood traveling up to my head to stop, completely turn around, and flow backward down my neck to feed the arm. It's an absolute masterpiece of biological plumbing. For 11 years, my body ran a continuous rogue workaround to keep the light on. But fluid dynamics have universal laws, and those laws do not care about human convenience. When fluid flows forward through a smooth pipe, it's beautiful. It's what engineers called laminar flow. It's predictable. But the second you force fluid to run backwards against a natural gradient, or shove it through a scarred, damaged junction, that smooth flow shatters. It becomes turbulent flow. It turns into a microscopic marine hazard. It creates tiny hidden whirlpools, vorticles, and stagnant eddies right at the junction. And if you know anything about blood, stagnant water isn't the only thing that collects danger. Stagnant, swirling blood is the absolute perfect breeding ground for a clot. For 11 years, that silent workaround ran beautifully in that background of my life. Until when the laws of physics finally collected the debt. That turbulent whirlpool is exactly where the clot formed, broke loose, and traveled straight up the line to my brain. This entire open-ended saga wasn't a sudden random system failure. It was an 11-year biological echo. It was the closing chapter of a workaround that my body built over a decade ago to keep me standing. So our bodies, our minds, and our sheer stubborn instinct to throw a pillow down on our way to the floor are a hell of a lot tougher than we give them credit for. But here is the ultimate twist of the modern world. While your biological machine is a masterpiece of resilience designed to fight for your survival, the human design systems waiting for you outside the hospital doors are designed to do the exact opposite. Because as I sit here recording this right now, the physical inflammation is finally settling down, and the reality of real life is rushing back in, including a jaw-dropping $152,000 bill waiting for me. Let's talk about that number. $152,000. Now, when you receive a piece of mail like that, your brain goes through a secondary trauma. You're sitting there, your skull is literally fusing back together, and you are holding on to a piece of paper that costs more than a sports car or a down payment on a house, stamped with your name on it. And it forces you to analyze one of the most convoluted, broken systems on the planet. American healthcare economics. Now, if you buy a gallon of milk or a graphic card for a PC build, the price is the price. It's determined by supply and demand and manufacturing costs. But in a hospital billing department, the numbers are absolute fiction. It is a concept called the charge master price, a massively inflated arbitrary sticker price that hospitals use as an opening gambit to negotiate with massive insurance conglomerates. If you don't know how to play that game, the system is designed to crush you under the weight of an unpayable debt. It forces you to realize that surviving the physical medical crisis is the only half the battle. The second half is an administrative chess match against a faceless bureaucracy. You have to request itemized bills, audit CPT coding errors, and look up internal financial assistance policies just to force the system to treat you like a human being instead of being an invoice. It is an incredible irony that the human body can pull off a flawless, elegant biological workaround for 11 years using the laws of fluid dynamics, but a room full of human administrators can't design a billing pipeline that makes a lick of logical sense. But I digress. Looking past the financial paperwork, this entire experience has forced me to confront something a lot deeper. It completely shattered what we all call the illusion of control. We live our lives in the modern world thinking we are pilots of our destiny. We manage our daily schedules, we optimize our routines, we build our careers, we obsess over our hobbies, we plan out our weeks down to the hour. We treat our lives like a perfectly calibrated machine. And then, on a random Tuesday morning at, let's say, 8 a.m., a tiny microscopic collection of cells that formed in a silent whirlpool down your neck decides to break loose. And in a fraction of a second, your entire reality is completely rewritten. You aren't in control of your calendar anymore. You aren't in control of your right leg. You are a passenger in an ICU bed, watching a monitor redline your blood pressure for 144 hours straight, entirely dependent on the laws of physics and the reflexes of the stroke team. It is an incredibly humbling, almost peaceful realization. We all spend so much of our finite mental energy stressing over the smallest, most insignificant things. We get angry at traffic. We lose sleep over an awkward email response. We stress about the logistics of the future. But when you look down at the barrel of a literal neurological cliffhanger and walk away completely intact, all of that background noise evaporates. You realize that the vast majority of these things we stress about do not matter. The spreadsheet you didn't finish, the minor argument you had, the daily anxieties of real life, they look microscopic when compared to the raw majestic of a heart and brain fighting like hell just to keep the cellular lights turned on. It gives you a permanent baseline of calm. So, where do you go from here? How do you step out of the Neuro ICU saga, pack your bags against medical advice, and just walk back into your regular life? This is the transition I'm navigating right now as the swelling in my head finally clears out. You don't just snap back to normal. You have to figure out how to transition back to a high energy job, how to manage the stamina of your covering brain battery, and how to look at the ordinary world through a completely renewed lens. You have to learn to listen to your machine. When it tells you to sit down in a dark room, you sit down. When it tells you it's tired, you unclip your microphone and sleep. Because if this gauntlet's proved anything to me, it's that my body is an incredibly loyal partner. It's spent more than a decade running an impossible Blackboard flow workaround just to keep me moving. It took the absolute maximum pressure my skull could handle in an ICU bed, and it held the line so that I could sit here today with my memory, my voice, and my mind completely whole. We like to think our bodies are incredibly fragile things. We treat health like a delicate porcelain plate that's always on the verge of shattering. But looking back at this 11-year timeline, I realized the absolute opposite is true. Your machine is built for resilience. It's an ancient, stubborn, brilliant piece of biological engineering that wants to live. It will reroute highways, it will redline its own engines, and it will fight through a storm to get you on the board. And even when gravity wins for a second on a Tuesday morning, it will make sure you throw a pillow down on the way on your floor. Thank you so much for listening to this incredibly personal episode this week of Mindless Fixation. So go ahead and take care of your systems. Watch out for the echoes, and I'm going to catch you on the next one. with that, the curtain closes on this week's obsession. Thanks for pulling up a chair and diving in the deep end with me. If you'd like to feed the machine and support this strange little show, you could find our tip jar links in the notes below. It's never expected, but it goes a long way towards keeping the ghost happy. And while you're down there, please follow and share the show with another beautifully bizarre soul. It really is the best way to help our corner of the static grow. Have a dark history footnote, a lonely cryptid, or digital mystery you think I need to absolutely fixate on? Send your thoughts via carrier pigeon, or just reach out on Instagram and mylatestfixationpod, or email me at mylatestfixationpod@gmail.com. Stay curious, stay obsessed, and I'll catch you at the next one.